Let's move on to fiscal policy. John, what are your budget priorities? And please be specific with any cuts or increases you propose, avoiding the generic wasteful spending category.
Sure. I believe it's important for the Commonwealth to defend the current basic education subsidy for public education. We are currently at 36% of the total cost of public education in the Commonwealth, and there is upward pressure constantly on the provision of a quality education. I think that in these circumstances of very, very lean budgets of declining revenues as a function of the recession, it's important that we make the essential commitment we need to make to guarantee the competitiveness of the Commonwealth. I'm deeply concerned about the safety net and the most vulnerable Pennsylvanians. I think that we have seen a considerable amount of the discretionary spending cut. I think there are still opportunities for discretionary spending cuts. I think there are circumstances, and I can tell you as someone who worked in state government as in an executive agency, we witnessed a budget of $565 million at DCED in 1 year, went down $300 million to $265 million. The decisions that were made associated with those cuts were made with the understanding, number one, that we were focusing resources where the best return on investment could be obtained by the taxpayer, and number two, where we were guaranteeing the ability to defend the competitive position of the Commonwealth in a global economy. I say this because I have been in the business of cutting budgets and trying to focus scarce resources to get the most bang for the buck for the taxpayers. And again, specifically, I think public education, the safety net is critically important. We have circumstances where we have to allocate state resources to guarantee we can benefit from federal dollars to help the most vulnerable Pennsylvanians. I think we have to make sure we leverage our commitment of state money to maximize the federal funding to help people in need, persons with disabilities, and the seniors in the Commonwealth. And I think that we also, while I know that there are cuts possible, I think that we have to be very careful about tax fairness as well in the Commonwealth regarding the revenues that we deploy.
Thank you. Frank, what are your budget priorities?
Andrea, could you repeat that question?
What are your budget priorities? Please be specific with any cuts or increases you propose, but avoid the generic wasteful spending category.
Our current budget is $29 billion. In 2000, it was $20 billion. Now, if we can't figure out how to solve all of our ills and woes with an additional $9 billion in spending, I can tell you this. I've signed 3 pledges: Americans for Tax Reform, Empower Pennsylvania, and the Americans for Prosperity. I will not raise taxes on the individuals in our Commonwealth. It's just out of the question. But when you speak about priorities, okay, we increased the operating budget of the DCED this year, Department of Community and Economic Development. Yet, we cut funding for libraries, which my children visit, which they enjoy, which is a learning experience. That goes right to education. Okay, priorities. We saw it in the Scranton Times. Scranton State School for the Deaf closed, budget constraints. Now wait a minute. Who comes up with these budgets in Harrisburg? Who votes on them? Where do our priorities come from? As a former school board president, as a former board director, with 2 children, 10 and 13, who really need the best education to compete worldwide in a global economy, we're going to make the dollars that we spend right now work for us. We don't need another dollar spent. But I suggest a freeze on any spending in the state. And in fact, as we go through this debate, I will further expound on how we're going to come up with some numbers. But $29 billion is enough.
John, any rebuttal?
The only point I want to make, elected officials have an obligation to make very difficult decisions with scarce resources and to guarantee the best bang for the buck for the taxpayers. My opponent did note libraries were not funded. The fact of the matter is, in the prior 8-year budgets that were done, the libraries actually did get significant funding, and it is very unfortunate when there are any losers, if you will, with respect to budget decisions. I think priorities are important. I agree with my opponent on the issue of priorities. I do think, however, it would be, it's a little disingenuous to indicate to the taxpayers of the Commonwealth that, that there's been irresponsible spending. I think that the commitment to public education absorbs close to a third, and actually public education and higher education consumes close to a third of the $30 billion that Frank mentioned. Another two-thirds of it is consumed by essential human services programs that provides a safety net for our most vulnerable Pennsylvanians. The slice of the pie for corrections is about 7% of the $30 billion budget. As long as we continue to adjudicate criminals and have to put them in prison, I think that we're going to have to, as a state, build prisons to accommodate that reality.
Okay, thank you. We're going to continue on with,
Do I have a rebut on that one, or
um,
quick? The DCED bot,
you
Sure.
did not have a
Nope.
rebuttal on that, no.
okay, I'll respect the rules, thank you.
Thank you.